Welcome to Seekers and Shifters, where we talk to the world's foremost experts in personal growth and development and ask them everything we really want to know. Hello, Seekers and Shifters. It's Michelle, and I am here today with Brook Bishop again, who's going to be a regular guest here on Seekers and Shifters. Brook, you want to introduce yourself one more time, just in case people missed you the first time?
It's like Hotel California, right? But yeah, my name Brook Bishop. I'm with all sorts of things, business things, personal things. But here today to talk about all that's weird and have fun about the things we normally don't get a chance to talk about.
Brook, you and I are both serial entrepreneurs, and I think it's fun. It's like, when somebody's like, "What do you do?" It's like, I do a lot of that marketing answer that everybody hates. I do lots of things. Which one do you want to talk about? But that's one of the reasons that I like you and I like talking to you is because you have so many diverse experiences and interesting things to pull in. What do you want to focus our conversation on today?
It's funny. It was before we jumped on, you had posted something on Facebook or on social media, and I was like, ooh, like I almost took the bait and started just writing frantically my responses on it. And I'm like, wait, we're talking today. So if I go unload on the social media post, what are we going to talk about in our podcast? But yeah, one of the things that you mentioned on there, now I'm sure you have an undercurrent story as to why you put the post, but it had to do with standards in terms of the standards we hold for ourselves. And if I remember correctly, it had to do with projecting those standards on others, something to that effect.
Yeah, and the undercurrent is something I can't get into too deeply here. I will say, just for everybody's knowledge, I got divorced in 2022. I'm still working through the aftermath of divorce, out of respect for my ex-husband and all of our beautiful shared friends and family. I'm not obviously going to go into any kind of personal details about that.
Now we have to double click on it.
No. I will say that, and I think I'll speak in universal terms about divorce, especially with somebody that you were with for a long time, because we were together for 15 years. And I have obviously in trying to work through is I've talked to other folks who have been divorced after being married for quite a long time or together for quite a long time. And this is a universal experience, which is that when we're in one place, we are a certain way. And then when we get into a different situation, we might come off a different way. That doesn't mean that we're a different person. It just means if you set me on fire, I'm going to scream, right? I'm still Michelle. I'm just screaming now because I'm on fire, right? And so I'm reacting to the circumstance that I'm in. And so a lot of times when we get divorced from somebody that we've been with for a long time, now you're in a totally different situation. They're in a totally different situation, right? We're in different households. We have different partners. And so what seemed like we were on the same page about now is different. Right? Just two different people acting in different contexts in different situations, right? So I just want to kind of say that high level. And so that's something I've been working through, because what that can feel like when you're going through a divorce is, oh my gosh, I thought I knew this person for a really long time, and now it feels like I don't know them at all. Again, that is not a knock on my ex. That's a universal feeling. He probably feels the same way about me. We're just in different contexts, and so we're different than we were when we were together. And so that was kind of when I saw this post, which I can't remember the exact wording, but it said something like, if somebody's not living, it's not everybody else's job to live up to your standards. In NLP speak, we would say, hey, I have my values, you have your values. They're different, and that's okay. It's not your job to live up to my values or my job to live up to your values, right? And so in terms of respecting other people's worldviews, right? I need to accept that you have different values than I do, that actually everybody has different values than I do. No two people have the exact same values in the exact same order, right? And so if I go around with this idea that everyone needs to live up to my values or my standards for myself, I'm going to be pretty unhappy, because pretty much nobody's going to be doing that. And so there's some interesting nuance there between what kind of expectations do I have for myself? What kind of expectations do I have for other people? What is it okay to expect from other people? And where do boundaries come into this conversation? So I just think there's a lot of interesting shit to dive into. What do you think, Brook?
Hot potato. Here, take the grenade, run. There's so many different angles and so many ways we could play this one. I love the conversation, the sense of standards, values. When working with Tony Robbins, we used to use the language of the model of the world, right? So you're talking to somebody else, they have their own model of the world. are you looking through their lenses? Or are you looking through your own lenses? Like, what's more important, or what should we do? Should it be like my lenses are truth, or your lenses are truth? There's truth somewhere in the middle. One thing that I'll share, and actually this would be a cool one we can share the link after the fact, but understanding people's communication styles is so paramount. And since you brought up the word values, understanding what makes other people tick and what their motivators are, I think is such a, like, that honestly has saved my marriage. And that's been a cornerstone in our relationship, is really understanding each other's communication styles and where we place our identity, or what we've conditioned in our identity, and then where our value sets are at. Because if my wife's having an off day, trust me, there's those days where I react to the stimulus response, right? But there's also when I'm centered, and hopefully I've done my work every day to get centered. When I'm in a centered space, I'll usually go through, okay, what is her model of the world? How is she perceiving things? What are her values? Where are things out of alignment, so that I can help get those things back in alignment for her? And she does the same, vice versa, right? So I think that for a lot of people, they probably have no idea what their communication style is, or what their values are, or how that even plays. And there's a number of different, profiling systems that are out there. Big fan of DISC. I'm also a big fan of heritage profiles. Have you heard of heritage profiles?
Yeah, I heard of heritage profiles. What is that?
Ooh, it's like Myers-Briggs on steroids is the best way I can describe it. Yeah, no, it's very interesting. So the difference compared to some of the other ones, it's more on rhythm and the way that people interpret and receive information, as well as give out information. So there's kind of both sides of the coin. Whereas you'll see a lot of them, it's more of like, here's how somebody communicates versus here's how they receive the information. So, but yeah, just a different one. But I know human design everybody's talking about human design right now. I know that's a big one that's on the.
There's so many different ways, and I'm big into spiral dynamics too. I love spiral dynamics. If you're thinking about how people value things, a lot of this is, NLP is really based in all of this. It's like, how do other people look at the world? How do they communicate? How do you communicate with them? How do you step into their model of the world, or step into their value system in order to better communicate with them? And one of the NLP frameworks that I love, when you're really like missing someone else, or when you're trying to negotiate between two people who are missing each other, like if you're a manager, for instance, we're entrepreneurs. If you have two people on your team who aren't getting along and you're trying to help them see eye to eye, is what we call chunking up, which is to take the concept higher and higher and higher level until we can get to a place where we both agree, right? So in the instance of co-parenting with someone, for instance, you can chunk all the way up to, hey, we both want what's best for our kids. We can agree on that, right? Hopefully you're at that point. I am at that point where we can agree we both want what's best for our kids. And then we might disagree on how to do it or what that means, but at least we're in agreement up here. So if we can find the place where we're in agreement, high level, world peace, whatever it is. And then we can start to drill down. It starts the conversation from a better frame. Hey, we're actually on the same page. We're actually on the same team. We actually want the same thing. We're just looking at it differently. We're talking about it differently. We have different values. Now we can start to get curious about, how are you seeing it differently than I am? And that's where really cool stuff comes out. Anyone that's managed diverse teams at work knows, and we love diverse teams. We know that when we do it right, better outcomes come out of diverse perspectives and diverse teams. And that's because when you have two diverse perspectives, two people who are working in good faith with diverse perspectives who have the same goal up here, right? What happens is that the solution that the two of them come up with is actually going to be better than the solution that either one of them could have come up with on their own. So that's in personal relationships. That's in management relationships, everything. It's so important to acknowledge other people have different perspective. Other people have different values. In terms of getting anything done, it's also vitally important for your personal happiness, because God damn, is it miserable to go around thinking everyone else is wrong all the time. Right? You just go around thinking they're all stupid or they're all assholes. I don't know, but clearly they're not seeing the right way, which is the way that I think about it.
So true. Yeah. I love the fact that you bring this up, because the diverse perspectives is such a powerful play. Right. And I think for so many people, whether it's our friendships or even sometimes our family members, especially we see that with coworkers, because I know both you and I, we work in different consulting capacities in different industries. But I can't tell you, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but how many times have you worked with somebody where they've hired all the yes men or yes women, where it's like you've got the figurehead and they've hired 20 other people that are like their clones, And you're like, no wonder you don't come up with different answers, because you've hired everybody around you to just tell you how great you are, versus like actually contesting things and actually widening the circle of conversation around your solutions. I think it's really critical. And I think it's really critical in our personal circles too, because how many of us have friends where it's like, we're all into the same things. We all see things through the same lens. And that's honestly one of the bummers of what I saw in the last couple of years, with just the polarity of what's transpired on the planet. And we won't say certain words so we don't get banned from YouTube here before we get out of the gates. But we just had this huge polarizing experience that's caused a lot of people to only align with people that see the world through the lenses that they see through. And my conversations in my world, I'm like trying to spawn more, like, not being an instigator, but trying to like open up the dialogue where it's like, hey, let's actually look at life through other lenses instead of the ones that we're, conditioned.
And it's so important for people like you and I to be out there doing that and kind of agitating that. And I'm not going to blame it on individual people. I work in politics, right? My day job is largely in the political industry. I will say that a lot of that was very deliberate. A lot of that we think was done by foreign governments very deliberately. And it wasn't just happening in the United States. It was happening in a lot of democracies all over the world. Bad actors were using social media to polarize people, to get people upset. And a lot of us got caught up in it, myself included, where suddenly, I had a wave of being self-righteous for a couple of years there. If anyone's followed me for a long time, you'll know that, on the progressive left, where I was just like, this is right and this is wrong. And anyone who's not doing this is, and I felt that deeply, like, you're trying to hurt people like me. You're trying to hurt my friends from the queer community if you're not feeling like that. And NLP really, really helped me break out of that in just a way that has made me so much happier. I'll give you an example, right? I used to, here in Virginia, we have some, they have the different license plates you can get. And we have some pro-life license plates. They're yellow and they say choose life. And so people sometimes drive around in those. Now, I am a progressive, liberal, pro-choice person who has a uterus, who has given birth to people, who has had all kinds of pregnancy complications, trauma, trouble, et cetera. So I'm a big pro-choice person just from my own life experience. That's one of my values. But I used to drive around and see these yellow license plates. And I would just get enraged every time I saw one. It was like, get your thoughts off of my body, and like flipping them off. Now, this is 10 years ago, Michelle, right? Michelle now sees that license plate and I think, oh, that person's probably Catholic. Like, cool, whatever. It doesn't make me feel attacked that they feel a different way than I do. Because I think, well, the people who I know who are pro-life, they were raised in a certain way with certain experience. They are also coming to their conclusions from their lived experience, the way I'm coming to my conclusions from my lived experience. And if I want people to respect how I feel and think about things based on my experience, education, et cetera, then I have to do the same for them, right? Plus, it's just not going to make me happy to get lit up every time I see a yellow license plate. That's crazy. That's not a good way to live, Brooke.
Especially with as much as you have to be in a car in Maryland and the amount of traffic you're going to be in. That's enough to tackle on its own, let alone having bumper stickers triggering you.
Yeah. And so, just these last few years coming to this, hey, respecting other people's worldview is not the same as agreeing with their worldview. You can still have your own thoughts and feelings. This is not about etch-a-sketching you to where you're a robot and you don't have any opinions on anything. You're allowed to have your worldview. You're allowed to have your values. It's just about not hating somebody else automatically because they have different ones than you. And in fact, how much happier we are when we get curious, because that's where the connection comes from, is me saying, hey, you think differently than I do? I wonder why. Like, what led you to that? If you're open to that conversation, what led you to that? Would you mind hearing me out about what led me to this? We're going to come to something that we agree on. If we do that, and if we do that with curiosity. And some of my best friends are people who vehemently disagree with me on lots of stuff, but they're open-minded and they want to have that conversation. Where my boundaries come in terms of who I do and don't want to spend my free time with, is the people who just don't want to have that conversation on any side. If you're so dug into what you think and feel and your worldview is the right worldview, that's okay. Like, I'm okay with that. And you're probably not like my first choice to go have dinner with on a Wednesday night.
But I think there's a lot of value in that last little snippet of what you just said. And I'm like, I want to go back and grab the recording and just like crop that piece for myself.
Recording croppers.
Recording croppers. This is your cue. Timestamp, whatever that is.
Right.
Now I just see pattern interrupt. Oh, but how many beliefs do we hold as kids that we no longer hold as truth? Or how many beliefs did we hold as teenagers that were at the time we would have gone to the grave thinking it was our truth or that it was the truth, that now we look back and we go, man, I was stupid. So like, is it possible that beliefs we hold here right now today, 20 years from now, we're going to look back and go, my God, I was a moron. Like when it comes to beliefs, I mean, shoot, take anything. Eggs. There was one point in time where eggs were considered super healthy food for you. Then it was eggs are going to give you, heart attacks because of cholesterol. Then the next day it came out, no, eggs are actually good for you. Now it's like certain parts of the eggs are good for you and certain parts of the eggs aren't bad for you. But then depending on where you get the eggs, like we take all these things as truth and we hold on to them and we literally will cling on to these beliefs at such a deep level to the point. I mean, shoot, look at what's going on in the world right now. How many crazy wars are because of someone's beliefs that they won't let go of, or they won't not even just let go of, but they won't be open to even witnessing someone else's belief. And I think that honestly, that's what happens in relationships. That's what happens in businesses, all the things that we as human beings walking around, the stubbornness to hang on to it is where a lot of the challenges come into play. And I think that there's just that to be in a position of influence, you can't be in that space of hanging on to the beliefs as being truth. And I get to witness this quite a bit because I work with so many coaches, all like in every niche under the sun. When coaches go to have a sales engagement with a prospective client and they start making judgments about who their prospect is, and they're like, oh, they're this way, or they believe that, or they have this religion, or this is what they believe about relationships. It's like they're immediately cut off from being able to influence and help that person because they're looking through their lens as if it's truth. And that's just a really tricky piece. But from your standpoint, because I know you've got a lot of background in NLP and a number of other modalities, for you to stay in that space of influence, to be in I was going to say more grounded, but just in a more zone of neutral, how do you play into that space and how do you get into that zone?
Well, here's where we can get real woo with it, right? Which is what this is all about at the end of the day. Bringing in quantum physics, because that's our favorite, right? What is real? What is reality is the most important question. When I'm working with a client, and I'll start with this concept, I'll explain it this way. You walked into the room and you saw the room a certain way. If a dog walked into the room, the dog sees it differently, maybe in a little bit of black and white. If a fly flies into the room, they see 1,000 of it. If a snake slides into the room, they're sensing infrared, right? The snake, by the way, is sensing infrared, something we're not sensing. But there's also things that we see that the snake doesn't see. What we look at as reality is really just how our human brains, eyes are processing the data that we have. There's actually all kinds of things going on around us that we can't sense. We know that. We know infrared exists just because we can't sense it. And so when there's a scientific explanation like that, people can get their head around it pretty quickly. And then we get into the next level, which is I'm not actually seeing exactly what you're seeing. We can. Did you ever have that stoner conversation when you were a teenager with your friend where you were like, I wonder if what I see is blue is what you see is blue. And you're like, whoa.
Yes, many times.
Like we just have to take each other's word for it because you might be seeing a totally different color than I'm seeing, but because it's consistent, that's always blue to you and this is always blue to me. We'll use an example sometimes in NLP where it's like, think of a beach, and we'll have everybody think of a beach, and everybody's beaches look a little bit different. Somebody's beach is like black rocks in Hawaii and somebody else's beach is like white sand. We have the same general conception of it, but when I say beach, it might not mean the same thing as when you say beach. Or a funny one they'll do sometimes is write down 5 things you think of when I say the word sex. And everybody's 5 things are hilariously different, right? And so we start to get to the concept of, oh, my reality is not the same as yours, nor is it the reality. And actually, and here's the fucking pivotal concept, it's actually something that I'm creating. And it's something that I'm creating on a constant basis. Consciously and more often unconsciously, right? Most of us are unconsciously creating our reality all the time. Some of us have started to get into a conscious creation of our reality somewhat. right? So I'm opening Pandora's box with that. That goes in a million.
You did just open Pandora's box.
when I walk into a room, and when you walk into a room, we can be walking in the same room. My focus is going to go to something different than yours is. Right? If I'm into interior design, I might notice the color of the upholstery, whereas you might think, oh, it's really cold in here, right? We're just having different experiences of the same room. Or when you go to see a movie with your friends and you talk about the movie afterwards. I liked this part. Oh, I saw this part. We all saw the same movie, but we got something different. That's why it's so fun to go to a movie with your friends and talk about it afterwards, because we know we're getting something different out of it, right? Where do you want to go with that, Brooke? There's a lot of direction.
Well, there's one piece I want to double click on, just because I think that there's almost somewhat of a misnomer, or I don't even know if I want to call it a misunderstanding, because as I just said, the beliefs we hold will be changed. But I see this dynamic of, in the woo side of things. So we look at the law of manifestation. And I think there's a lot of people that get spun around, like, only the good things that happen to me I've manifested. Or they're thinking from the aspect of, if something bad has happened, they've actually gave it the label of bad. And so there's this dynamic, for at least just for me, where a lot of that perspective for me has shifted, is in the aspects of, this is the highest good for me at this point in my life. Now, when you hit the shit, right, when you've got bad things happening, if I'm asking, okay, what's the highest good for me at this point in my life? If I'm manifesting this, we can take all things, whether good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, I remember back when I got fired from my job 20 years ago, I thought it was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. I was the victim. I was like upside down. My life's going to end. But when I flipped that question to, like, okay, well, what's the gift and what's the highest good that's going to come out of this? And it took 3 or 4 years of exploring to really look back and then go, oh my gosh, that was a magical thing that actually happened. Holy crap. Had that not happened, I wouldn't have the learning, or I wouldn't be here, or I wouldn't have this experience. And so I think there's just this dynamic of turning off the switch of good or bad. Because I think we've been conditioned, whether through society, whether it's through movies, right? The person that's in the white, the person that's in the black, whether it's in the, just all these different dynamics of good and evil, bad and good, through every religion. I mean, the list goes on. But I think we get conditioned that if I either had a good day or I had a bad day, the food was good or it was bad. And we've become very, it's almost like absolutism. I don't even know if that's a word, but I just made it up.
Well, yeah. And I want to take us off the hook a little bit for that, because that is our brain's little way of trying to make sense of everything and trying to reduce overwhelm. It's like when you're walking down, if you think about a hotel hallway, if all the doors were open, I don't know which door to go in. And so the brain wants to just close doors so that it's less overwhelming. And that's okay. That's natural. That's what our human brains do in order to reduce the overwhelm of the stimulus, because we're getting 2 million bits of information, sights, sounds, feelings at any given time. And our brain can process 126 per second. Right. And so there's all kinds of things that we're just not getting all the time. And your brain is constantly, unconsciously making the decisions about what am I going to take in and what am I going to leave out here. So that, that's thing number one to understand, because when you understand that, it's like, oh, I can focus on a different 126 bits if I want to. That's what we talk about when we talk about creating our reality, right? In terms of what's good and bad, it's okay that your brain wants to do that. And in personal growth, we start to open those doors back up and go, but what if it's not? This is where we bring our curiosity in, right? This is that old Chinese proverb, could be good, could be bad. Do you remember that one, Brooke? It's like the guy, the horse runs away and the neighbors say, oh, what bad luck. And then the horse comes back with like 30 other horses behind it. And they go, oh, what good luck. He's like, good, could be bad. And then the son like falls off the horse and breaks his leg. And they go, oh, what bad luck. It could be good, could be bad. And then there's a draft and the son doesn't have to go to war. So, we don't know. We don't know. And it's that concept of, is this happening to you or is this happening for you? And if I can try to look at everything, reframe everything as happening for me, this is where faith comes in. And, we're agnostic in terms of what you believe. For people listening to us, we're not representing one religion or type of belief. We have our own faiths and our own beliefs, and so does everybody listening to this. But the role of faith in general, is it God? Is it Jesus? Is it Allah? Is it the universe? Whatever. What is that force that's looking out for you and putting you down the path that you're supposed to go down? Sometimes shoving you down the path that you're supposed to go down. Sometimes like a pinball machine pinging you, in the right direction that you're supposed to go down. But something, and it, if you're listening to this, something pushing you down the right path. And sometimes shit happens that fucking sucks. And it sucks and it knocks you down and it comes like a left hook out of nowhere. And anyone that's lived any kind of life to this point, we're in our 40s. Anybody that's gotten to this point, you've had some of those experiences where something just left hooked you. You know, and it can be offensive to people to say, oh, that happened for you or that happened for a reason, right? That can be really triggering for people. By the way, we're not here to not trigger anybody. I'll just give you that disclaimer. Triggering people is triggering you, triggering me, triggering us is how we explore what's going on with us. It's actually a good thing to get triggered. It's a red flag of here's some shit I need to explore. There's something underneath this that's triggering me, right? So I just want to say that if you're getting triggered with me, I'm not trying to not trigger you. If you want to hate comment me on YouTube, that's cool. Or, you know, I can handle it, right? We can handle it. But yeah, this concept that if I want to see that something was for me, no matter what it was, with enough time, with enough perspective, looking back, I can see even something that was horrible. Like when my dad died, that was horrible. People who've lost a parent, horrible, horrible, horrible. And I'm not saying, oh, I'm glad that happened or whatever, but I'm looking back and I'm saying, oh my gosh, here's all the empathy that I got from that. Here's all the perspective that I gained from that experience of losing a parent. Right.
I think you're hitting on something that's, and again, this is in the NLP space and personal development space and neuroassociative conditioning. Like the quality of the questions we ask, like is going to determine the quality of the answers we get. And we're, to your point, right? We're picking up 126 bits of data, but we have the ability to command our system to seek out the bits that we want to find. And there's just two simple questions that have been instrumental for me in when shit's hit the fan in my life, but it's what's the lesson? What's the gift? What's the lesson? What's the gift? And every time we go back to that, whether it's, you know, if you're having financial challenges, it's like, okay, what's the lesson? What's the gift? Cool. Like you can find answers if you keep digging deep enough and if you ask better questions than they're after that. If you're getting crappy answers, don't keep trying to find different answers. Change the question. But in that spirit of in the quantum physics, when we create our own experience, we create our own life, we're creating our own journey. It starts at the point of question, right? Because at knocking the door shall be open, asking you shall receive, right? So it definitely plays in there.
100%. And I want to pull something out here because it's the timing of this question that sometimes gets us in trouble in the personal development world. We actually had a really interesting conversation about toxic positivity in our Seekers Club that we run, right? And this is where people get turned off is because they say, well, something awful happened. And now you're coming to me and saying, look for the good in it and find where it was for you. And like, fuck you, I want to feel bad. Yes, feel bad first. It's the timing of this. We're not saying that you need to go straight into that 5 minutes after the left hook. That's actually really kind of unhealthy, right? That's dissociative. We don't want you to do that. We want you to take the time to feel your feelings. If something awful happens to you that is very sad or you feel angry about it, or you feel frustrated, it's very healthy for you to feel your frustration, feel your sadness, process through your grief. All of those things. We as coaches, we hold a lot of space for that. We let that empty out first. When we have the time, like later, when it's appropriate, then we can come back when we have the perspective and say, what did I learn from that? Because there is always something. There is always something, but it's okay to feel horrible first. It's healthy.
I know. Yes, I know exactly what you mean. And I think that there's a lot of times we give ourselves, it's almost like a treadmill of disaster, right? Where it's like, I feel bad and I'm going to feel bad for forever. And there's almost like this theatrical thing that goes with it. And then guess what? We start to feel bad for forever. I don't know. Have you played with giving yourself a deadline of like, okay, I'm going to feel like shit for 3 days. Like I'm just giving myself full permission. I'm going to have a pity party. I'm going to cry. I'm going to scream. I'm going to feel all the emotions, but I'm going to give myself a deadline. It's 3 days. At the end of that 3 days, like that I'm going to snap, right? Have you played with fixed deadlines?
Yeah. I have played with it and I've come away from it because sometimes you need more than 3 days. I actually first read that concept a long, long time ago. It was a Jennifer Aniston interview. And I think it was in the aftermath of her breakup from Brad Pitt. That's how long ago this was. So some of you get that reference, hopefully. But she said, well, her therapist said, you know, you have 1 day to just do whatever and then you get over it. And I remember being like, oh, I like that. You know, I'm going to try that and see what that's like. It can get into that dissociative where it's like, okay, my day's up, so now I have to stuff it. And that's not healthy. If you need 2 days, if you need 3 days, okay, sometimes it's a big one. If you're grieving something like a death or a divorce, it's going to take you more than 3 days. And that's all right. I tell my friends who are getting divorced, this is going to take you like probably a good year, and that's all right. It does get better eventually. It will get better eventually. But that first year, man, you're processing through it, and it's healthy to let yourself do that. So I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with the 3-day deadline. I do think
I wasn't given a fixed moment, but just testing it to go, okay, I'm going to feel like crap for the next hour, and that's okay. And then I'm going to redirect my focus. But yeah, no, if it's big stuff, I fully agree with you.
In the first place. Sorry, we talked over each other.
You go first.
If that's what you need in order to let the feelings come up and out in the first place, like if you're so dissociated from it that you need to say, oh, here's my crying day in order to allow yourself to cry, then okay, like that's a starting point. I think we can evolve past that and get to the point where it's like with grief, you're going to cry randomly at first a lot and then a little bit, probably for a long time. And that's okay.
Now, what I was saying before I talked over you rudely. No, I was actually agreeing with you. Yeah. If it's big stuff, give yourself grace and give yourself that window to roll through it. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times there's, that old adage of, misery loves company. And I think there's often times where we can just find connection in our turmoil and find connection through our chaos. And so there's this other piece of, okay, great. If you're focusing on those pieces and if we're, meaning making machines that are creating our own experience, if we keep finding ourselves tripping into that same space of the misery, we definitely have to take some inventory and go, okay, I'm going to focus on the misery for this window of time. And then I'm going to redirect so I can create what I want versus consistently creating that which I don't want.
Absolutely. And this is where release work is super, super helpful. You and I just did a little bit of it before we got on the recording today because we wanted to come in clear and feeling good. And sometimes when you're talking about little stuff, usually little stuff that's upsetting you is indicative of something bigger under the surface, right? It's something that we haven't dealt with. We like to call it baggage in NLP, which is another sometimes triggering word, but we call it baggage. Baggage is the stuff and it's generally installed from 0 to 7 years old. You can get into past life trauma. You can get into generational trauma. We can get real weird with it, but it's old stuff that got stuck in your body. We know the body keeps the score, stuff that gets stuck in your body. And then something little triggers it. And we know that it's our baggage getting triggered when we're having what we call a disproportionate or inappropriate response to a stimulus, right? So if my dad dies and I'm crying, that is appropriate. That is proportionate. Somebody died, somebody very close to me, I'm crying. If the yellow license plate goes by and I start screaming and flip it off, that is disproportionate and inappropriate. That's not about that guy and his license plate. That's about something deeper. For me, experiences that I've had, including, having a very painful miscarriage where I had to have that surgically terminated, that is pulling on something like that, a really painful, true experience. But seeing the license plate is not the painful experience. It just reminded me consciously or subconsciously of the very painful experience. And so I had a disproportionate reaction when I saw it. If I don't go through and release my old feelings about that and get that clear, I'm going to freak out every time I see that license plate. Really, really miserable way to live. Right.
Note to self, not driving by you with yellow on my car anywhere.
No. I released it. It's cool. I'm good now. I'm good now. It's a great example of what, right? We do this thing in NLP, and I don't know if you know about this book called Mental Emotional Release. That's trademarked, by the way. I got to get TM, mental emotional release, TM, or some people call it timeline therapy. And it is a way that we can go back and do visualizations and dissociate from old baggage in a way that releases it so that it's not still affecting us today. And so that the anger I feel today is about something that happened today and it's proportionate to what happened today. I'm not blowing up on somebody about something that happened to me, or for me when I was 6 or 7 years old. Right. And we need, and on our personal growth journey, we're starting to learn the difference.
Yeah. Timeline therapy, we actually referred to it as Dickens process. Have you heard it referred to that?
I've never heard it referred to as the Dickens process. No.
So if you remember was it the Christmas Story or what?
Oh, Charles Dickens. Yeah.
Yeah. Charles Dickens. So it's like when you go to the past, the present, the future, and then like you start to scramble and you ping pong through them all. And it's, Yeah, definitely a wild experience. So on that note, in the space of the weird and woo, what's the weirdest thing you've done in terms of from an emotional release process or something that you participated in that's just others might perceive as being out there?
The energetic release stuff that we do from Hawaiian Huna could be perceived as really out there. That's actually what you and I just did, where I'm actually pushing energy to help people release stuff. I think that's a difficult thing for some people to hear about or understand. What I love about having a lot of modalities in my tool belt, and you mentioned that I do, and I do, is that I can meet somebody where they are. So if they're into energy work, we can just release it with energy in about 30 seconds. If you're open to that, we can do that. If you don't like that or you think that's bullshit, like, okay, we can release it with a visualization. If you want to have a cognitive process like timeline therapy, or if you're more into somatic work, then we can do stuff with the spiral, with acupuncture points and rubbing on where it's stored in the body. So if somebody's really into like embodiment and somatic stuff and they want to release it physically, we can release it physically. So I can release it mentally, physically, spiritually, like whatever the fuck you want to do if you're ready to let it go. That's why I like learning so many different things, is because I can, I have different techniques, and all of those things, by the way, that I just mentioned are ways to release old baggage within, a few minutes or less.
There's a really important distinction that you made in there. And I want to make sure anyone who's listening catches this one little nugget that you just mentioned. If you're ready to let it go, like that's a huge piece of that puzzle that I think oftentimes people are like, I want my circumstances to change, or I want my feelings to change. But you asking that question, because that was an important piece of what you asked me before we hit record on this, is you're like, are you ready to let it go? And I'm like, okay, let me actually sit with that for a brief second, because I know the sound hit my eardrums and it was like the answer wanted to come out of my mouth. But I'm like, okay, let me let it sit down in the heart. Do I really want to let it go? And I had kind of a little battle with myself of, I'm like, do I really want to let it go? I'm like, I really do want to let it go. Why am I? And then the question comes up, why am I fighting to not let it go? I'm like, what is that?
That's exactly right. I mean, we're trying to ask the unconscious mind. And by the way, when we say ask the unconscious mind, it's the first gut hit you get. It's going to give you a yes or a no. What happens most of the time when people haven't done a lot of work with their unconscious mind is they'll start to get conscious. Brooke, you did this a minute ago. Do I want to let it go? And all of a sudden it's in your conscious mind, which, by the way, thinks it's the CEO. It's actually the doorman, is trying to take over the process and is trying to analyze whether or not you want to let it go. When your unconscious had given you a really clear answer, which was like, for this person, yes, and for this person, no. And we want to kind of work with that original answer. So when we get a no, a really strong no, often somebody's in a people pleasing moment. They want to say yes. They'll say something like, I know I'm supposed to say yes. Or why can't I let it go? It's kind of like what's happening with you. We have to go back and say, no, the unconscious said no. We're going to respect the unconscious. We can still work with it. We're going to respect it. We're going to meet it again, meeting you where you are, big theme here. So if it says no, we're going to say, ask your unconscious mind, why not? Right? A lot of times, which is the process you went straight into consciously. We got to stay unconscious with it. A lot of times the unconscious is going to surface something like, well, because I'm not safe if I let it go, or something like some version of that that's going to have a reason. Then we can work with logically reframing that, if we can, to where we can get to the point where it is ready to let it go. Sometimes the unconscious is going to throw up a wall, and then people are going to say things to me. I hear this as a practitioner. No, there's like a cement wall. I can't get behind it. There's brick wall. I don't know what's going on. They'll start to get upset a little bit. I don't know why I can't access it. Oftentimes when I hear that as a practitioner, I know there is a deep trauma underneath that. We talked a little bit about assuming, not assuming. It's just a pattern, right? It doesn't mean for sure that's always true, but generally there's something really like very traumatic that happened that their brain is not going to access, because the unconscious, one of the prime directives of the unconscious is to keep us safe. And that thing was so traumatic, that might have been some type of abuse, molestation, something like that when they were a child. That thing is so traumatic that the unconscious has actually repressed it to the point where it's not even going to let it come conscious, because if it does, it might hurt you, and it's trying to keep you safe. When I hear something like that, if we try to work with it a little bit, but if we can't get past it, that's the point at which we would refer out to a clinician, somebody who has a complex trauma specialty, to help somebody work through something like that. That might be where somebody needs to use techniques like CRM or EMDR to get past whatever's going on with them, that we as coaches aren't qualified to do. So part of coaching, Brooke, is it's so important to kind of know, here's what I can deal with, and then here's what's outside my wheelhouse. And for me, working in integrity is very much like, here's where I know I mentioned substance abuse the other day. If somebody's got a really severe substance abuse problem, that's not something I'm qualified to deal with. Here's where I know this is something that, where I need to help somebody get medical help, clinical help, therapeutic help, because it's beyond my scope. But there's a lot we can work with, barring things like that. There's a lot that we can work with the average person.
Love that. And love the disclaimers on there too, because it's so true. And I'm sure you've seen this so many times. At least I know I have so many coaches who were not equipped, who just, for the sake of whether it was the business or whatnot, they just wanted to keep their client there in that spot. And it's like, holy crap, use the word integrity, high-fiving you from far away. Being in integrity is such a critical piece of this puzzle. And I think that's, that creates that safe space of self-exploration, because that's really what we're talking about. I mean, that's the whole, at the end of the day, of what seekers and shifters, like, what are we doing? It's self-exploration. It's like, how do we expand? How do we grow? How can we have a safe space to have weird conversations? And at the end of the day, if we just get one new sliver, one little golden nugget that can optimize our experience, shit, that's awesome. Like I think that's what it's all about, right? In terms of what we're doing and why we're doing this and why we've been having these conversations. Because all it takes is one distinction to change the game for our life experience. One distinction of, that didn't happen to me, it happened for me. Like that one piece alone. I hope for anyone who's listening right now, if you skipped the first 15 minutes, go back to the beginning, because that was like magic, right? Like that one distinction can change our entire life experience. It can change how we witness our spouse, or how we witness our partner, or how we witness our kids or our employer, or whatever happened to us when we were little. Like if you can really come to terms with any one of these golden nuggets, yeah, there's so much power in that for ourselves, right?
Absolutely. And I think where I want to leave people with this today is that if and when you are ready, there are ways to shift this. If you're not there yet, it's okay. It's okay. We're not saying everybody has to be ready and you have to be ready to let everything go right now. If and when you get to that point where you go, man, I really want to change my life. I really want to change how I experience everything. I really want to be a lot happier. I've done all the things I was supposed to do and they didn't make me happy. And now I want to actually shift inside of me in a way that makes me happy. Then, man, we can work with that. Like, come see us, right? And so if you like this type of stuff, if you're triggered, we're not sorry. Explore what. If you're enjoying these types of conversations and you like hanging out with me and Brooke and talking about this kind of stuff, come hang out with us in Seekers Club. Seekersclub.org is where we're hanging out. We're talking about this stuff every single day. We're doing trainings every single month. Brooke, you want to say anything about the Seekers Club before we sign off today?
Yeah, but before we might have to change the name of our podcast to a trigger warning, just for all.
Michelle, Brooke.
Yeah, no, for anyone to, I mean, you did a beautiful job of just the sentiment. It's pretty freaking rad. I'm not going to lie. It's a really cool place that we get to go have the weird conversations, the esoteric conversations, where we just get to post the question of what if this, what if that? And it's really honestly just a safe space for us to look outside the label. There's been so many pieces already, so many trainings we've already done where I'm like, okay, like I've had training or experience in that area, but because of the way in which we're having this conversation, because of the dynamics and the people that are participating in it, I've had so many distinctions, even just in the early days of this thing cooking right now. So yeah, for anyone who's out there, if you're wanting, let's say perhaps you don't have those friendships or those connection points where you can talk about this stuff, or perhaps they're not open to asking what if, or here's an alternate perspective. Just know there is a community that exists that is very safe, where you can go have those deeper dialogues. The one other thing that I'll share about this that I think is just so pertinent. There's so many conversations. It's almost like in society, we've had to dumb down the conversation. And this is the opposite. It's one of the things I'm super grateful to you, Michelle, for putting this together, in the sense that we can all come together and it's like we can geek level up instead of like toning our light down. I'm witnessing everybody who's in there. It's like, oh, like there's an up leveling versus a throttle, if that makes sense. So yeah, anyone who's wanting to participate and experience something and level up, definitely come check it out.
Seekersclub.org. I think the number one thread there, what we're looking for is curiosity. If you're curious and you're exploring, that's why we call it a Seekers Club. You're a seeker. We want you in there with us. And if you just want to hang out and listen to Seekers and Shifters, hit the subscribe button. We love that too. Please. We're trying to get this out there and find more people like us. So, if you're one of us, come hang out. We love having you around. Brooke, wonderful talking to you as always. Brooke will be back on the podcast, every few episodes here, and we will continue to nerd out, trigger people and do whatever we do. Thanks for listening, guys. And, thank you, Brooke.
No, thank you, girl. I'm super, super stoked. We got to have another dialogue conversation, and I'm pumped for the next one.
See you guys soon.
Bye.